Welcome to ADHD Rewired. This is episode number 7. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. Whether you have ADHD and you want to learn more about it, or you are looking for ways to organize your time, your things, or the many details of life so you can get more done, this show is for you. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. I am your host, and I have an allergy to paperwork. I break out in piles and procrastination. Well, we know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's put it off for just one more moment while I tell you about this. The Attention Deficit Disorder Association, the nation's largest organization focused on supporting adults with ADHD, will be holding its annual conference in Orlando, July 24th through the 27th. Come meet me and hundreds of other adults just like you. Register now at adda.adhdrewired.com. That's adda.adhdrewired.com. Oh yeah, there's a talent show. Okay, now we can get started. Welcome to episode number 7. Today, we are going to talk about procrastination. I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the reasons we do it, and I'm going to share with you some strategies that I've learned that have helped me and many of my clients procrastinate less and do more. Later in the show, I'm also going to share with you a great app I recently discovered that can actually help you with procrastination. So you want to stay tuned to the end to hear what that app is all about. And we are going to continue to hear from you, the listener, the ADHD Rewired community. It's funny, right now I'm speaking off the cuff because this is the first time since I've been recording this podcast that I find myself kind of nervous behind the mic. And I've actually re-recorded the first few minutes of this a few times already. And, you know, I'm actually feeling sort of anxious about this. And I think the reason is really ties into the content for today's show. So you guys have been unbelievably supportive and amazing with your feedback that you guys have given me. I mean, some of the reviews that I have gotten on iTunes, it just has blown my mind. I've heard people talk about that when you start getting those emails from people telling them that what they are hearing is making a difference in their lives. And I'm starting to get those and hearing some of those on Facebook and through people's personal emails. So I want to share with you some of the reviews that I've gotten, and how this connects to what we're talking about is I feel similar to how I did when I first started feeling successful in college. And it was this feeling of, oh, now that I'm finally, for the first time in my life, successful, the bar has been raised so high that I have this performance anxiety, in a sense, to maintain that level of performance. So as I'm getting all this positive feedback, I feel this pressure to keep producing a good show. And clearly people have liked what I've already been doing, so I don't need to change anything. But I noticed yesterday, so I'm recording this on Tuesday, the 15th of April, and I had planned on writing my notes for the show and recording yesterday. And I spent about 4 hours kind of prepping for the show. And I was thinking to myself, why am I doing that? And I think it goes to one of the points that we're going to talk about on why we procrastinate, and that has to do with perfectionism. But I'm going to get into that in the show. But I do want to share with you some of the comments that I've gotten because it's amazing. And I really want to encourage you to share your thoughts, your feedback with me. You know, I love the good stuff. I really do. And it helps people find it. But if there are things on the show that you think could improve the show, share that with me too. That would be awesome, because we don't get better unless we accept and embrace feedback. It's awesome to hear the good stuff, but we grow from the stuff that may be hard to listen to. I'll start with the review by Gord On. And this review says, I don't get distracted while listening about how to get organized. Author is good. Author is a good speaker, clearly. Nice quality, helpful strategies. So that was a nice one. There was one that really, really touched me this week. I'm trying to find that one. It's hard to actually talk and look at stuff at the same time. We call that attention splitting, and no one is really good at that. And people with ADHD are exceptionally not good at that. Where is the one I'm looking for? Here's one from The Overwhelmed Brain, which is from the host of the show, the podcast, The Overwhelmed Brain. He says, I host a personal growth podcast, and I really dig the information here. It helps me understand all the subtleties to ADHD and other things the host talks about. Really digging the info. Thanks. Here's one by someone who calls themselves LMCACB. As a teacher who works with kids ages 12 to 14, I found that the information and advice presented in these podcasts is eye-opening. It helps me relate so much better to my students who are affected by ADHD. Every teacher should listen to what Eric Tivers has to say. Thanks. That was really nice. Okay, I'll read one more. This one is by Gwyneth Paltrow. Isn't that an actress? I don't know. I'm horrible with actresses' names. All right, she says, or he, I have no idea. This person says, I appreciate the genuine suggestions for personal improvement from an intrinsic and compassionate place instead of just selling solutions. Pleasant and optimistic to listen to, plus funny at times. Looking forward to more episodes. Recommended by my brother. We were both diagnosed with ADHD in our 20s and, like Eric, have formed our own careers working with people living with disorders and disabilities. I'm sure most people with a later diagnosis of ADHD can relate to his story in episode 1 somehow. Great insight as an insider. Did you guys hear that? She thinks I'm funny at times. I humor myself. I don't know if I humor anybody else. All right. So thank you guys for the reviews. And I want to remind you and really encourage you to go to my website, ADHDrewired.com. I have there on the top part of the page a microphone widget that says Ask Eric. What that does is when you click that on your computer, is it will open up a panel that will ask you for permission to access your computer's microphone. You can ask me a question to be featured on the show. You can make up a name if you are concerned about your privacy, and I would encourage you to be creative about the names. Just keep it something that could still be viewed or listened to if you are, let's say, a parent driving to work and you have a kid in your car. So you kind of get my point. Moving on. Let's see, what else? Oh, there was an email that I actually wanted to read. So I'm going to pull that up. Here we go. Let's see. I'm pulling that up. You know, the beautiful thing about audio recording is I'll look at the long space that I didn't say anything and delete that. So you don't have to painfully wait while I try to find the email. Or here's an email from someone who I'm just going to call her Code Owl. I know her name, but I didn't actually get permission to say her name. So her name is Code Owl. And I actually asked her for some feedback. We've been emailing back and forth. I think that I met her through a webinar that I gave, And so anyways, the feedback that she gave me is that I very much enjoy the not funny jokes, which actually work pretty well with my love for dry British humor and other tangents. I found it helpful to see how you bring yourself back to the topic because I'm not so good at that yet. And I did share with her that, one of the ways that I do that, both on the show here, is I do kind of use an outline, although I do stray from it at times. But when I'm in conversation or I'm working with a client and I know we're going on a tangent and I want to allow ourselves to go there, I will just write a word down that will help me kind of find my way back to where we were going. So that was the first comment she said. Then she says, and this one I love this feedback. It was regarding a prior episode. I think the episode on self-improvement and making big progress takes small steps. So here's what she says. My only tiny and also unimportant point of criticism so far is the mathematical inaccuracy in episode 4. Let me also give you some context. She's, I think, a computer programmer. So math is, I think, probably her thing. Okay. So that was in episode 4. When you do something once, it is not 100% more than doing something never, because 100% of 0 is still 0. So doing something 100% more when you are starting from 0 equals 0 plus 0 equals 0. And she adds a emoticon smiley face. Going from never to once is actually infinite percent more. However, you could do it the other way around, like going from doing something once to doing something never, because going from 1 to 0 would be less, or would be 100% less. 1 minus 1 equals 0. I shall now stop my geeky math tangent, and I hope I didn't completely confuse you. Well, Code Owl, I've now read this 5 times and I still have no idea what this means. So, which I just thought was great, because when I recorded that, I remember saying that phrase about doing something 0 is 100 times more than doing it. Doing something once is 100 times more than doing it 0. And I had this little voice in the back of my mind that says, I'm really hoping that no one's going to call me out on that, because I kind of felt that may actually be inaccurate. So thanks for keeping me honest on my math skills. And I'm sure that I have mentioned that math is not one of my strengths. It's actually something I try to stay away from as much as possible. Well, I was asking her about what she would like to hear about on the show. And she also suggested that it might be easier, instead of just going to my website and writing some thoughts or what you want to hear about, is for me to create a poll so people can vote. And I think that's a great idea. I haven't done it yet. I will probably do it in the future. So check out my website, ADHD Rewired. And if you go there and you don't see a poll where you can vote yet, feel free to shoot me an email just to say, hey, I'd love to see that poll. So it'll kind of give me that motivation to get on that. Okay, shall we get into the topic at hand, procrastination? I think I've been putting it off enough already, don't you think? Okay, so let's really get started. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why I procrastinate and what I've learned to do about it. So I think one of the biggest reasons why I procrastinate, however, with this one, I've really done so much better and have learned so many strategies regarding this one, is that it's too big. The project is too big. It's too vast. So the things that I do to break this down, or to tackle this if something is too big, is I break it down. I really focus on the first steps. I might use a mind map to do a brain dump. So really trying to figure out, where do I actually start? Because if you don't know where the starting line is, how are you going to show up for the race? And big projects require some endurance and some planning. And, we know that starting is often the hardest part. If it's too big, we have to break it down and really focus on that first part. The next part, which I think ties into this, is, when I don't know where to start. So number 1 it's too big. Number two, I don't know where to start. This is much less of an issue than it used to be for me as well. So I recognize that starting is hard. This is part of my intro line, that starting is the hardest part. I think that when we can recognize that and just kind of take it for what it is, then it kind of makes it a bit easier. Often I think it's going to be so hard to get going. And then what I realize is that I often think it's going to be a lot harder than it actually is. So while I hate the word just, because I think it minimizes how difficult some things can be, so, we'll just start. It's like, duh, if I hadn't thought of that myself, maybe I just would have. But I think when it comes to this, looking at how many times I have put something off, and when I actually sat down to do it, I realized, wow, this really wasn't actually that hard, and it actually wasn't as big as I thought it would be. So, I try to kind of remember those things and say, okay, if I do just start, that, maybe it won't be so hard. If it is and I'm confused, I can take a break from it and kind of regroup shortly thereafter. So when you don't know where to start, that is a huge part of why you might be putting something off. If I have a project to do, but I don't know kind of what I'm going to do it on, then brainstorming is the start, not actually starting the project. So planning is really the first part to any project or task that you're doing. Even if you're putting off going to the store, start with planning. That's often the first part. To do any task, the first thing we have to do is set it up. So whether that's to write a report, whether that's to answer an email, whether that's to do a big project, we have to really take that time to plan, and planning is often the first part. So number one is it's too big. Number two, I don't know where to start. The third kind of reason I procrastinate and what I've learned to do about it, well, I guess this isn't a reason, this is just something that I do about it, is I talk to someone about it. What's kind of neat about this is that there have been many times that when I start talking to somebody about it, just kind of verbalizing it helps me think through it. And I will often answer my own questions just talking through something with somebody. So kind of using somebody as a sounding board. When you get stuck, use your words. It's really amazing. We have to really stop trying to do mental problem solving. When we try to problem solve in our head, it's not a good place to store information and then work with it. That's called our working memory. We have to be able to externalize, get that key information out. So whether that's talking about it, writing it down, using a mind map, voice recording it, record it into a voice text recognition system. These are one of many ways that you can get the words out, get your thoughts out. The next one, number 4, is definitely a reason why I procrastinate at times, and I'm sure that many of you can relate to this. It's because it's so boring and I hate it. We all have those tasks that, no matter how important we know they are, that we're never ever going to want to do it. And it's really important that we identify those tasks for what they are. They're boring and they're tedious. We would rather, poke needles in our eyes and watch paint dry. I don't know. It's something that it's really is hard for our brain to kind of stay engaged in the task. And when things are boring and tedious, when you have ADHD, understand that it's your brain shutting down. This has nothing to do with you and your character. Okay. It's when you have ADHD, I look at boring with a capital B. It's a truly distressing emotional state. When we identify them, these tasks, for what they are, then we can build strategies and supports around each one. When we can identify what the reason is, so if it's boring and you hate it, let's just call it that. It's a boring task that we hate to do. So we can identify it, we can name it. And these, this is the reason we have labels. We have to name it to tame it. So an example for me is, I used to, in my practice, do my own billing. And I would actually have anxiety while entering credit card numbers and doing billing. I think I was talking to my mom actually about that. And she would say, well, don't you like getting money in your bank? Of course I like that. I like the reward. I don't like this part of the work to do it. So, but one of the things that I actually learned through this process, and it's unbelievable that I didn't know this until 2 or 3 years ago, in my late 20s or early 30s, is that I have dyscalculia. And I actually didn't remember the word for it when I was putting the notes together for the show. And I usually just refer to it as numeric dyslexia, which, I think makes more sense if you know what dyslexia is. So anyway, I went onto the Google and typed in numeric dyslexia. When I went onto the internet machine, I came to one of the most reliable places for information, Wikipedia, which according to the article I read, 1/4 of children with ADHD have dyscalculia. I'm surprised that I didn't know that. That was kind of news to me. I guess I'm not surprised by it, but I guess I just wish that I knew that I had that a long time ago. Maybe it would have let me get through college math in less than 3 attempts. Well, I did get through it with a C, and they can never take that away from me. I digress. Okay, and what dyscalculia is, let me just explain how that works. So let's say there was a 4-digit number. It was like 4228. What I would do is type in 4288. And what was so frustrating is that I would repeat this over and over again, like the same number. I would do this 5 times. So I learned some strategies. One of the things that I did is I would read it out loud or I would record it, and then I would play it back and then enter the number, listening to myself play it back. It's a lot of work, right? So some other things that I hate doing and are tedious are tax documents. And if you're listening to this now and you are thinking, oh no, April 15th is come and gone. Yes, you are late. So you try to get on that, maybe file for an extension if you can. I actually don't know. We have an accountant who takes care of all that for me, and my wife takes care of all the communications for us. And she says, Eric, sign here. And I say, okay. So I know that if I needed to do it, I would, but I hate it. So my strategy is that I have help. Anything that requires a lot of thought, if I'm not in the mindset to do it, sometimes that could be email. Someone emails me, 5 different questions in one email. I guess as a public service announcement for all people who you will send email to, if you are asking somebody a question, please try to keep your email to 1 question. This will certainly make the response time, at least for me, and I know I've also read this in a lot of productivity books and articles that I've read, people prefer 1 subject per email. I often ask my clients who email me that if you have a couple questions, split them up in a few emails. So that way, if I know 4 of the 5 answers to your questions, I can answer each one of those individually instead of waiting on all of it because I don't know one answer. I hope that made sense. Anytime that there's a tedious process of having to go through and do stuff like that, anything that involves auditing and double checking and just kind of that process oriented work where you have to follow the same repetitious process and dig for information, it's so boring. Okay. So anything that involves needing to find reference information, because it's, my brain doesn't always know really well where to put information, so then it makes it hard to find it when I need it. Here is the 5th reason why I procrastinate. So I didn't update my title. I have 7 reasons here, it looks like. I wrote 5 reasons, and that's what I said in the title, and it looks like I have 7. So once again, I don't care, whatever. Here's number 6. No, here's number 5. It needs to be perfect. So, striving for perfection is, I hate it. It's so frustrating. And I know I have that tendency myself. And I think in some ways, it's a coping mechanism for, screwing stuff up. And because we know with ADHD, we tend to screw stuff up a bit more than people without ADHD. But one of the things is, so if I could have spent, 4 or 5 hours less planning this podcast, and as far as you guys, the listener, if you would have still enjoyed it, then I think that mindset that I have, and I tell my clients, and I try to live it, but not always, is that perfect sucks and good enough is great. So I guess when I look at recording this episode, I kind of procrastinated on it because I wanted it to be really good. And hopefully it is going to be really good. I am definitely going to be giving a lot of thought to how do I speed up the planning process, because I am really dedicated to keeping this a weekly podcast. I don't want to miss a week. If I'm going to do that, if I'm going to keep that up, I can't have it take me 5 hours to plan what I'm going to talk about. So here's how you guys can help with that. Go to my website and record a message or send me an email asking me a question, and I will answer those questions, and that will be integrated into the show. Okay. So that was number 5. It needs to be perfect as reasons why I procrastinate. Number 6 is I don't remember what I needed to do. When this happens, I have to ask for help, and I've learned to do it, and I really don't have any problem asking for help. One of the things that I do, though, is I assume I'm going to forget, which is why, as I stated in episode 5, it is so important to capture everything. And I also stated in episode 5 that a great way to do this besides your iPhone or your smartphone to capture everything is using a LiveScribe smart pen. And there is a link to that in the show notes to episode 6. And there will also be one on this show as well. And so I don't forget that, I'm going to make a note right now and include link to smart pen. Okay. Assume you're going to forget when you get information, but it has to do with capturing information. But, sometimes we don't capture stuff when we maybe when it would have been nice to do so. So ask for help. Try to trace your steps backwards if you can. And if you need to tell someone that you can't find the email that you last received or whatever it is, it will take you less time, and people really don't care if you need to ask them for help, if it will be easy for them to just resend something to you. Okay, number 7 is it's so far away that I can't even see it. If you've heard the saying before, just begin with the end in mind, and thought that sounds good in theory, but you had no clue how to do that in practice, welcome to the club. I came across a few years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, at a CHAD conference, a program that helps with teaching executive functioning skills called Seeing My Time. Some of the strategies that were included in this were the idea of using a month calendar or a 3-month dry erase calendar. I think also works great. And I actually did that in grad school. But the first task for a project, as I was mentioning before, is to plan it. So in your calendar that you surely use on a regular basis, schedule an appointment with yourself called Plan Out the Paper. Now, let's assume that this was a paper. If this is a big project, give yourself at least 30 minutes to do this. Trust me, when you spend time to plan, you are going to be saving time that you could spend later. Oh, I just made that up. That was pretty good. I'm glad I'm recording this. So the first thing to do then is put the due date or the goal due date on the calendar. And it should say paper due. But be specific. Assume you will develop amnesia, or you just have ADHD. And when you see this in your calendar, you're going to panic and say, what paper? So write those details in your calendar. 2 days prior to the due date, write complete paper. Now, this is intentional. We are great. When I say we, I mean people like me and you who have ADHD and maybe aren't great at planning and wait to the last minute to do things. We are great at forgetting about things until the last minute. And then when we ask ourselves, how did I not remember this? Or why didn't I know this would take me so long? Or why didn't I know that I would need more time? So we want to give ourselves that cushion room and plan for that. So if this is a report, we have to think about, what does done look like? Maybe done looks like you emailed it to your boss or your professor or a prospective client. Maybe it means you've printed it out and put it in your trusty outbox, which you, of course, reliably use when you have to give something to someone. That might be for a future episode. I'm still working on my own outbox. You have one of those, right? I know I do. It's in a pile that I'm looking at right now, and it's not pretty. Yeah, we'll dive into that later as soon as I kind of get a better handle on my own. Okay, where was I? Oh, here we go. Let's be creative and think about all the possible things that could go wrong. And if we look historically, probably we've experienced these things. Things like, our computer breaks down. We have a printer problem. We have a virus. We impulsively decide to go to the Caribbean and forgot that we have to be back in time to turn something in. I've actually never done that, but going to the Caribbean now would be awesome, considering that it is April 15th. I think I said that earlier. Oh, yes, it's tax day. Happy tax day. It snowed here in the Chicago area yesterday. I mean, it's stuck. It's still on the ground. So going to the Caribbean sounds awesome. Wow, I'm going on a lot of tangents here. Okay. So what I was saying is, you want to really plan on completing your project or your paper a few days ahead of time. Plan for the unexpected. You might get sick. Your great aunt Susie's pet poodle might be ill, and you couldn't bring yourself to say no when she asked you if you would come over and clean up after the dog. So stuff happens. Look, we all know that stuff happens, and if you have ADHD, we know that more stuff happens. So plan on that stuff happening. We are optimists in all the wrong places, thinking that we'll have plenty of time to do something. We have to recognize, as I mentioned on an earlier episode, that's one of the lies that we tell ourselves, that we'll have plenty of time. When you have ADHD, you can count on the fact that things will take you longer than you anticipate. So plan on it. Trust me. I've gone through that so many times, and it's so frustrating. We pull the all-nighter and then we are useless the next day. The other thing that I find so interesting is that there's information that is locked in our brain, and only at that very last moment is it released from our brain. And once we get into the nuances of understanding how our brain works, there are things that we can actually intentionally procrastinate on. For me, one of the things that I do this with is, if I'm giving a presentation, all of those kind of last minute things, like the materials that I want to bring with me, that's something that I know I can kind of grab the night before or the morning of, and I typically have enough time to do that. If I try to think about it 2 weeks ahead of time, it doesn't come to me. Now, the smart thing for me to do, remember how I said when you say these things and think through these things out loud, sometimes you answer your own questions. So I think the smart thing for me to do would be to, next time I have a presentation that I'm giving, is create a checklist of everything that I did at that last moment. And then that will become my checklist for what I'm going to do the next time I have a presentation. Why didn't I think of that before? Just thinking about thoughts. Interesting. I can't wait until there's a microphone that can just read your thoughts. Then I can just sit here and stare at a screen, and you can hear all of the many thoughts that I'm having all at the same time. I should try to create an auditory kind of simulation of what it's like to have ADHD, kind of using multi-track recording with some, I guess, effects. Totally going on a tangent. I'm going to end it there. So that's okay. I am all over the place this morning. That's our first dive in to procrastination. I'm guessing this is not going to be the last time we talk about procrastination unless I put it off for a while. Let me know, what do you guys procrastinate about? I really want to hear from you. Go to my website, ADHD Rewired, and you can make comments in the comments bar that's on the bottom of the page. You can also go to my Facebook page, which is just ADHD Rewired, and talk about procrastination there. One of the things that I am hoping to do in the near future is to organize some groups through this podcast that we can kind of get together and have some accountability work groups together. And as I am thinking through that, I will have more information that I will share with you guys as to what that will look like. And now it's time for my tech tip of the week. Today's app that I'm going to talk to you guys about is an app called, it's for iOS, Procrastination. So I'm opening up the app, and on the main screen here, you are given a couple options. You're giving, I guess, 6 options. You can choose from: my task is too big, I don't know where to start, I'm making mistakes, I have to finish, I have to be perfect. Oh, look at that. And then underneath that, there's also a procrastinator quick task. So I'm going to tap on the one that says, I have to be perfect. Okay. So it gives me some information about being perfect. So you have to be perfect. To be perfect, you have to possess supernatural powers. Those of us who do not possess supernatural powers can't be perfect. The only way a human can be perfect is to be perfectly human. And that includes being imperfect. We fail, we learn, and that makes us human. Instead of blaming yourself for not having supernatural powers, you should concentrate on what's important, getting started, and your project. So let's create a new project or select an existing one. So now I could select a project, and how annoying. I'm getting a call right now. Okay, so now I'm selecting a project, and I can choose from project list or new project. So let's say I create a new project, and I'm going to call this one, let's see, I'm going to use Siri here. Create an online coaching group for listeners of ADHD Rewired and help them procrastinate less and get more done. Okay, so that's my project. And then I'm going to tap on next. And what it says is, now let's find an imperfect but perfectly human place to start. The selected project doesn't contain any active tasks, so you have to create a new one. For example, read the table of contents, find the tool in the garage, send an email. I'm missing a tool in the garage? Put the first task that pops into your brain. What's important now is that you get started. Okay, so the first task would be, so I'm going to tap on new task. My first task is going to be create a mind map of titles I can use for this group. Okay, then I'm going to tap next. And then it says, now it's time to get motivated. After one session of productive work, you should reward yourself with something you really want. Remember that short-term rewards, for example, coffee, are more motivating than long-term ones. For example, career opportunities. That's very true. Okay, so let's say, and I guess you could set up your own rewards, but it comes preset where you can take a 5-minute coffee break. So let's say I choose that, and then it's time to get started. Remember that you should concentrate on getting started with your task, not finishing it. You should focus on finishing the session, not the task. After one session of productive work, you can enjoy your reward. At the end of the day, you can look back on your procrastinator stats and be proud of yourself. And it actually gives you the option to open a timer. So that's a pretty neat thing. One of the other cool things in settings is you can actually create, or you can integrate this with your iCal calendar. So you can be creating this task and it will automatically populate your calendar if you use iCal. So that's pretty awesome. I highly recommend this app. I'll put a link to it in the show notes page at ADHDrewired.com. Well, podcast listeners, you have just listened to the 7th episode of ADHD Rewired. I'd love to hear from you. Do you want your question or comment to be featured on this show? You can contact me through my website, ADHDrewired.com. Click on the microphone icon that says Ask Eric to record your voice, or email me through the website. Let the world know what you think. If you found me on iTunes or on Stitcher, please head back to where you found me and leave me a review so others can find the show as well. Your reviews and your ratings are clearly helping people find this show. So a big thanks to those of you who have left me a review and to those who are going to do it. If you leave a review on iTunes, would you be so kind as to multiply your love and copy and paste that into Stitcher? I want to give a shout out to an awesome Shiny Chicken group on Facebook who suggested the idea for today's show. Next time you are procrastinating on Facebook, be productive and share ADHD Rewired on your Facebook page and share it with your friends. I'm thinking of launching a contest for those of you who leave reviews and share this show on Facebook. Do you have an idea for a contest giveaway? Post your idea on my Facebook page, which is ADHD Rewired. In the paraphrased words of Dr. Ross Green, there is no such thing as a bad idea, just one that I might not agree to. Don't forget to go to ADHDrewired.com for links, tips, and more. You can sign up for my email newsletter, and I promise I will send it to you much less frequently than I actually intend on. So sign up at my website or text Tivers to 22828. That's TIVERS to the number 22828. This is Eric Tivers, and I want to leave you with the words of Zig Ziglar. If you wait until all the lights are green before you leave the home, you'll never get started on the trip to the top. Until next time.